Welcome to today's Australasian Mining Histories Association's Zoom lecture series on August the 13th. Today's talk will be about the Emperor Gold Mine. Today's speaker is Lee Spencer. Lee has over 40 years of mining and exploration experience, having worked in Southeast Asia and the Pacific since 1976. Initially, he was with the USA-based AMHA Incorporation and subsequently as a consulting geologist on various projects, often in remote island locations. Lee identified the Sampaka alluvial diamond deposit in Indonesia in the 1990s and subsequently developed the Sampaka into Indonesia's first commercially sized diamond mine. Lee subsequently accepted the position of CEO for ASX-listed company Kuala Gold and subsequently discovered a 2 million ounce gold deposit at Woodlark Island in Papua New Guinea. A detailed feasibility study was completed on a 100,000 ounce per annum mining operation. Lee is currently working on an epithermal and porphyry copper project in North Queensland. Lee has published a number of scientific papers on gold in PNG, diamonds in Indonesia, and has written a book on the history of mining and exploration on Woodlark Island, PNG. A copy is in the National Library. Interests include mineralogy and mining history in the Asia-Pacific region. The Emperor Gold Mine in Fiji is the world's largest epithermal gold deposit with an active operational history extending back over 80 years, and thus one of the world's longest-lived gold mines. The mine was discovered by prospectors who undertook arduous exploration over a number of years, culminating in the discovery of payable gold in 1932. Over to you, Lee.
Okay, everyone see that?
Yep.
You're on.
Okay, I've been to Fiji on several occasions. In the 1980s, I worked at Namosi, which is a big Fiji copper. Unfortunately, I never got to Emperor Mine, but it was a very interesting hearing, mainly because, as Ed alluded to, it's had almost 80 years of production. It was also the second largest industry in the Fijian economy. Not often mining takes a massive precedence over a small country. It's on the, as you see there, it's on the official stamps of the country as a gold mine. It had to go through, because it had Telluride ore, it had to go through some metallurgical innovations. It also went through a period of initial discovery, a large share market boom, and subsequent bust. Was the first one of the first instances of Australian capitalism in the Pacific Islands in a large way. It then went through a period of constant development and production, and then through a period of instability, and then ultimate revival. So it's still in operation as we speak today. So, okay, we'll just go on the second slide. Not allowing me on the second slide. There we go. Just a bit of a snapshot of Fiji for those who haven't been there. We're about Fiji is about 3,500 kilometres from east of Sydney, about 2,500 kilometres north of New Zealand. Bit of a snapshot of its history. I've put yellow stars to the main ones there, but essentially it was discovered in by the Dutch in 1643, and in 1801 it was the first Europeans made a permanent settlement there. In 1874 the island was handed over basically to Queen Victoria in England because of a debt that was perceived to be due to the United States. So rather than pay the money, they handed it all over to England. And ultimately, in the 1880s, you had the CSR opening their first sugar, and you had cotton, and then ultimately in 1970, Fiji gained independence. So that's a bit of a snapshot of the country. The Emperor Gold Mine. I've listed the major events in its history from about 1872 right through to 2011 here. I'm not going to go through each of those items, but essentially what we have here is a period of discovery in colonialism from the 1930s, a period of capitalism, and a big share mining boom. We have a period of this development, period of independence, and then massive political instability coupled with low gold price, mine closing, and now since 2008, a period of revival and modernisation, all in the one mine. So a unique history. So where did it all start? Well, what I've done here in the Asia Pacific region, or Pacific area, was you really got 4 periods of gold discovery. What I've called first contact, and Mondano in 1568 mentioned gold in the Solomon Islands, and obviously Abel Tasman was looking for gold as well, and that's why they called into the islands. So, and then you have this colonial phase, and that's really built on the initial gold discoveries at Bathurst, and they were following up into Queensland. And they're the various dates of the Queensland, and then they went into Papua New Guinea. So how it relates to Fiji, of course, is they actually found gold on the Nasivi Delta in 1872. So that was the first discovery of gold. But no major developments like Papua New Guinea or east coast of Australia. Then we have what I've called the depression phase in the 1930s, when the gold price really zapped up. And that's when we see the reactivation of a lot of these old gold fields. And well, we have the discovery of the Bololo gold field in 1930. And that's when we see the discovery of gold in a big way in Fiji in 1932. So you have this cross-development and transmigration of throughout the Asia Pacific from Australia in those periods. And of course, now we've got the modern phase, which is outside the scope of this presentation. So Fiji itself, there's 330 islands, 540 islets, 3 million square kilometres, only 100 islands of which are habitated. The main 2 islands are Viti Levu and Vanuatu. So gold was discovered here in 1872 on the coast, and then after a sustained prospecting from 1930 to 1932, we have gold being discovered in Lololivu Creek, which is the site of the Emperor Gold Mine in 1932. And these are the few, I've listed a few of the other areas where gold was discovered in various times. Now, you may ask, why didn't they find gold in the hinterland? Why did it take so long? Well, really, it's because of land ownership and fierce tribal ownership of the various lands, and access was not permitted, basically. So, and the same story happened in Papua New Guinea as well. So the 1930s became a real discovery rate in the Southeast Pacific. So here we have presently some still major mines in Fiji. Of particular note is the Vatukoula mine, which we're going to talk about today, and the big Namosi porphyry copper, which contains around about 4.6 million tonnes of copper and 4.6 million ounces of gold, and they're still exploring it, still getting bigger. So Fiji is even though a small area, it's quite well endowed geologically. Okay, so how it all started in 1930, we had 2 prospectors by the name of Bill Borthwick and Jack Sinclair. They were funded by a publican in Suva called Costello, and over a period of 3 years, they visited all the drainages in the hinterland, and finally in 1932, they camped at the junction of Vunasia and Lololivu Creek, and they discovered gold. In 1932, December, they posted a tobacco tin of gold back to Costello in Suva. And you know, in 1933, they started eluvial mining. And then we go through a period of where a group headed by Theodore, and I'm going to talk about him a little bit later, he wanted to do an option agreement over the discovery with Costello. Then there's a bit of playing around. Then 1970, in September 33, £1,000 worth of gold was extracted. And then Theodore forms this syndicate with Frank Packer, and then they do a deal and so on. Then there's the big rush in Fiji. So that was the real crux of the history there over a period of 2 years. So this photo down below shows one of the first constructions on the site in early 1933, and that's that's Borthwick and Costello, the two white fellas sitting in there. So I managed to find a photo in the Pacific Islands monthly. That's the first surface workings of at Tavua Goldfield, and interestingly, you see the hills. They don't have any vegetation on them even then. So that's a natural phenomenon. So, and another great photograph of Bill Borthwick taking gold in his saddlebags out from the Fijian goldfields early on in the period. You can see the white quartz. This has all been dug by hand here. So there's some great photographs. A bit grainy, but unfortunately, that's all we could get. So who were the key players? Well, in the start of the field. So here we have Bill Borthwick. He was a 70-year-old prospector who came from New Zealand, from Waihi, and he was engaged by Pat Costello here to go and look for gold. So he was the first guy who found it, and he was the guy who grub-staked them in the Fijian area. And it wasn't a one-off thing. He'd been looking for gold in Fiji since 1915, so he was very persistent. But obviously used some of his gains from his pub to fund the activities, the prospecting activities. So then along came a guy called what we call Red Ted Theodore. Now he was a Labor premier in Queensland. He then became federal treasurer under the Scullin government, and he had to resign over what we call the Mangana affair, whereby he had shares in a company, in the Mangana company, which sold Mangana to the Queensland government for a huge profit. So it looked a bit of a corruption there, so he had to resign over that. But he put together a syndicate together with Frank Packer and some Melbourne-based businessmen at that time of Cody and Wren. I found out who Wren was, but I didn't know who Cody was. But Wren was a bookmaker, a promoter, and racehorse owner, and so on and so on. So he knew Packer through newspapers, and Theodore owned a newspaper when he was in the trade union movement. So that's how they met up. So these guys formed the if you look at the Emperor Syndicate, and they came up with the first £100,000, which allowed Costello and Borthwick to do proper exploration, if you like, of the gold discovery of the veins there. So, and then to really ensure that they had something of significance, the syndicate hired a geologist by the name of Clive Lostis Hills. He was ex-Tasmanian government geologist, and he assessed the Tavua goldfield and came to the conclusion that it was a significant discovery. So these are the people involved up to them. So once the word got out, there was a huge staking rush in Fiji. In fact, all the islands were completely staked. It was a massive rush. Now we've seen this on several periods of time. I was actually involved in the large staking rush in Indonesia when the Briex thing came about. So it was of the size of this. So small companies were listed throughout basically on the Melbourne Stock Exchange, but hundreds and hundreds of companies were listed, and most of them were duds, but a few of them were significant. Now, the diagram on the right shows the original newspaper article that was the mud map that was put together by Dr. Loftus Hills, the geologist, showing all the veins as they knew them outcropping at surface. So although there were different companies involved, a little bit of research on each of those companies showed that Theodore was actually the owner of most of these. So he actually, instead of putting it all under one company, he had multiple companies and listed these multiple companies on the stock market. So he actually made money and heaps of money out of each of these little companies. So eventually they did consolidate it many years later. But just to give you an idea of some of the crazy share prices that were going on as a stock boom, in 1934, you're looking at £10 shares in the Yalloa mine. Was sold in Melbourne for £170, then £430. So it was a huge, it went crazy. And this other newspaper article in September 1935 down here shows these are some of the listed companies in here. And look at the share prices going up, £50, £5 to £16. I mean, that's just massive. So a lot of people made money and a lot of people lost money. So, and it's very interesting in 1935, in this newspaper article here, it was reported in Melbourne that the Western Australian shareholders, share promoters were under the cloud a little bit because they were overawed by all the Fijian stock market activity. But so it got into a huge bubble. So what made the bubble worse, of course, is that Theodore and his party, with Frank Packer, formed a new company, the Emperor Mine, and he listed that. It had a nominal capital of £1 million, which was quite large for those days. But it must be admitted they spent their £100,000 initially, and were actually had a plant, a 2,500 tonne an hour plant, already established by 1935. So they were moving quite fast. And here a newspaper article on the right says that hang on, I'll jump. That now Mr. Theodore is now a millionaire, and so are the prospectors. So, and here they're saying congratulations to Mr. Theodore. And on the next one, they're all in this newspaper article here, they were saying that Pat Costello wrote this, and he was backing that you can't knock Mr. Theodore because he put up the £100,000, and I couldn't raise that money from anywhere else. So this is quite an interesting article. So they'd floated the company, and floated several companies in the case of Theodore. But in most of these boom and bust period, there's always a scam. So there was no less a scam in Fiji called the Nisi gold scam, and that had some tenements around the Travua goldfield. So in 1935, it listed 2,000 shares at £5, and of course 250 of those shares went to the promoters. So they announced to the stock market that they got surface assays to 15 ounces, which is massive. So the shares rose from £2 to £57 in July 1935, and in September 14, shares crashed to 10 shillings, and then Loftus Hill says get rid of the tenements. So whoever bought these shares lost a lot of money. So another scam, but the Fiji government decided not to enter an inquiry here. So by 1935, the stock market had collapsed, and in Fijian stocks, and the boom had gone to a bust for a lot of shares, but there were three tenement holders that stood out. One was called Loma, one was called Emperor, and the other one was called the Dolphin Mine. So those three actually started operating. So, and there's a nice article written in 1936 by the author here. Said he's seen lots of people go mad over Fiji. There was a massive slump and there was a collapse. But he actually visited there in 1935 and said he was really amazed to see that scores of building had already been up. So the money was being spent properly. And the first powerhouse was built here in September 19. Well, it was already in construction here. Now, interestingly, the power to be supplied to the new mining area was also as a separate listed company on the Melbourne Stock Exchange. And guess who was involved? Mr. Theodore again. So here he is again making a new company and listing those shares as well. So he must have been churning up the companies like sausages. So nonetheless, from 1933 to the discovery of gold when they first started in 32, steady state production, and slowly in this article here in 1940, we see gold production now from 2,000 ounces from alluvial methods in 33 to 110,000 ounces in 1939. And we see a photograph here taken in 1940 of the Loma mine and the Emperor mine. Now, the Emperor mine, although this talk is about the Emperor mine, the Loma mine and the Emperor mine and the Dolphin, they're all linked. They're all the same. And these are the three, the Emperor, Loma and the Dolphin. And they amalgamated in 1958 into one mine. They should have been amalgamated from the start. It would have made things easier, but Mr. Theodore decided to multiply them. So by 1948, here's a aerial photograph of the Emperor mine itself. And you see here in the left corner the open cut. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. And here's the plant and facility. So, and there's the shafts. There were 4 shafts. So as you see, it's a major industrial complex built in a very short space of time. So a little bit before we go on any further is why did the Emperor mine, number one, last for so many years? Why did it create a boom and it was long-lived? And why were there 3 mines? Well, it's all to do with the geology. So the Emperor mine's based on a quite unique geology for the rest of Australia, and that's why I had a lot of early geologists and mining engineers stumped a little bit, because it was related around an old volcano called the Tavua caldera. And this was a volcano that had risen up, if you like, and then collapsed. And then there's a massive structural zone that ran through the middle of it. And all these veins occurred in the structural dislocation zone on the western side only. And this has caused this was one of the reasons why there was such a boom, that all these mining companies claimed the rest of the caldera, because there was nothing there. The only gold was on the western side. So, and here's a little cross section I thought was most useful. So there's the original volcano, and when the magma comes up, it forces this to rise. When the magma crystallizes, it collapses, and you get all these faults around the edge of it. So that's where the Emperor mine is located in relation to the old volcano. On the left-hand side, we see a surface map of the workings at the Emperor and the 3 mines that are in production. The pale green is the edge of the caldera that we mentioned previously. The pale yellow here is the surrounding volcanics. So all these red lines here are all the old veins, or the veins that have been known to surface, and the brownish area is open cuts. So as you can see, one of the reasons why it's lasted so long is it's because it's got multiple veins. It's not just one vein, so it's quite unique in that fact. And secondly, it was unique because these veins not only were individual veins. They amalgamated in places, particularly where a place called the Emperor Shatter Zone, and these formed areas of quite decent ore for a long period of time as an open cut, not only an underground. So, and then slowly the underground workings took over from the open cut, and then that was accessed from these 4 shafts. So on the right hand side just shows you a cross section from A to B across the Emperor, and it shows the relationship between all these vein systems. And there's the open cut at the what we call the Emperor Shatter Zone, and there's the edge of the called area in here. So you can see all these major vein systems in here. What is unique for Fiji is what we call these flatmates, which were these very long flat lying structures. They're exceedingly rich and stretch for quite a long period of time. So on strike, the gold was associated with this tellurium mineralisation, not only free gold, but just before I get onto that, these are some of the, I'm not going through all the vein systems, but basically have a look at the grades on the right hand side. I mean, they're enormously rich. They're comparable to some of the highest gold grades that you find anywhere. So again, gold grade, tonnage and multiple vein systems was one of the reasons why Emperor Mine is still in production today, and they're still finding more new veins. So the ore mineralogy was unique in the fact for Australia, Australian experience, in the fact that the gold was associated with what we call tellurides and tellurium, not so much free gold. So there were 47 mineral species associated, 13 are tellurium rich. So most of the gold occurs with this mineral called silverite. And this is a specimen in my collection that was mined in on the Loloma vein in 1938. So that's high grade varying gold tellurides. Look, just a couple of other photographs. Photograph on the left is actual tellurium crystals, which are quite rare. And on the right is petsite, which was another source of ore. Again, you can't see gold. The gold's locked in the lattice with tellurium. And in rare occasions, there were free gold. This specimen is from Waigold, from the level 7 on the Emperor vein. And that would have been mined in in the late 40s. So this crystalline gold was rare. So free gold was quite rare. So most of the bulk of the ore was locked in sulfides, except where the ore was at surface and it got oxidized. So this, because the gold was associated with the tellurium, it required a really different way of treating it. So it was okay when they were mining the oxide ore at the surface. It was readily cyanidable and standard metallurgy could apply, but they had to use a system of roasting and then cyanide leaching after roasting. So that required, and this is a little bit of a historical sort of summary of the metallurgical sort of improvements over time. And what I didn't know was quite interesting that the roasters from Fiji came in the Second World War from the mine in WA, You and Me mine, when they now looked at recovery of the very fine goldite, which was refractory gold in pyrites, pyrite ore. And they used to, in the 1950s, when they went underground, they used to actually treat the ore from the in a ratio, and extremely high grades, over an ounce, they used to just treat on a batch basis to reduce losses. So, and now they're actually, research is still going in 2010, they're looking actually now recovering tellurium from the ores, which they didn't do before. So it required a really new think of an experience for Australian operators to be able to treat these tellurium ores, which really are only, they were occurring in WA, but mostly in the United States in a similar setting to Fiji. With regards to mining at the Emperor mine, as I mentioned previously, most of the ore was sourced from the open cuts, and therefore was oxidised and easily cyanidable treated. But photograph on the left actually shows the pre-1942 buckets and shovels and trucks from the open cut, and then from 1946 onwards, the surface ore was being depleted, and more they had to go underground. And because the veins were narrow, that required a high manual input, high labour cost to extract the veins. They were exceedingly rich, but also very narrow. So by 1953, most of the ore was from underground. Look, this is just a shot of the old open cut and the Emperor Shadow Zone and the mining method that they used. It's a long section, so they used to draw levels. So again, all hand done, all put into ore carts and then hoisted back up to the surface. I'm not going to go through the detail, but these are the three shafts that were in operation on the various veins. And again, these are three different companies up until 1958. There's a photograph in the file, again, just showing it was all hand done with Fijian labour who were basically unskilled. So they had to train up the locals to actually work in pretty harsh mining conditions, I'd imagine. If you have a look at the next photograph, you see most of these guys taken in the 1930s don't have shoes on. So I'd say the conditions wouldn't have been very wholesome there early on. We see post 1958 the ore open. This is part of the Emperor Shadow Zone. This is an open stope underground. It's a bit grainy, unfortunately, but it just shows you the ground conditions. This is a timber support. That's a great photo holding up the roof. And they started to use mechanical scrapers there to scrape the ore back out to the ore passes. And this is a shot in 1951 on the William Wallace shaft. The miners going underground. So this is just a bit of, I don't want to go into a lot of numbers, but these are the statistics from 1935 to 1951. So for the Emperor mine, they mined 2 million ounces at a head grade of 11 grams, which is unbelievable. The Loma mine was much smaller in production, but its head grade was 40 grams over an ounce and a half. And the Dolphin mine was almost 2 ounces. So huge grades. So statistics, and look at the increase in production over time. So very steady state. So that extremely valuable gold production from the three mines there. And as time went on, the infrastructure started to increase and get better, particularly for the local people. So Emperor Gold Mines established a maternity hospital. They established a bowling club. Looks like a little bit like North Queensland. There's the Fijian married quarters, and there's the golf club, which looks like it needed a bit of a mow there in 1940. So the mine was more traditionally like what you'd see in Australia. I got this from Dyson. He sent some photographs. These are some fantastic photographs from the period to 1970. This is again. This shows the flat make structure and the width of it here, and the method of mining by the Fijian miners. Diagram on the lower right shows rays when they were mining the rays, but connecting between the two levels. I don't think they'd be allowed to do this nowadays, but looks a bit hairy there. And on the left-hand side is the management photograph of the people who used to run it, all with their ties on. And there's not one Fijian face in the management, so that was quite interesting. Let's see that photo. And there's a photograph in 1968 of the William Wallace shaft. Looks more like a postcard actually. So, and that's on the edge of the caldera, and that's the infrastructure as it looked in '68. So in summary, from 58, from the period 58, again, we showed an increase in tonnage. So that period of time, the 10 years, they mined almost 2 million tonnes from underground and only 200,000 tonnes from the open cut. And it was highly profitable. And EGM was one company, as I mentioned, in 1958. Loma, Dolphin and Emperor all combined into one. And they were listed on the Australian stock market for many years and very successful and paid dividends. So if we have a look at where we are at the moment, this is a plot of the history of the Emperor mine in relation to the gold price. So we see the discovery of the mine in the 1933. We see the stock market boom, which I've outlined, and slow development over a period of time up to the 1970s. Continuous production all the way, even though in a declining gold price, the grades, the underground grades, more than compensated for weaker gold prices. So we come now into a period up into the 1980s where we see spikes, very much volatility in the gold price. In the 1970s, the gold standard was lifted and the gold was free floated to a point where the mine's getting quite old now. That's 50 years old. Underground mines, if you don't invest in infrastructure and you just keep extracting ore, then you run out of ore and your infrastructure goes slow. And this is what happened to Emperor in the 1980s. So we see Emperor closing because of the dip in the gold price and the aging infrastructure. So now we end up between 1980 and 2000, a period of what I've called instability, whereby the mine, Emperor mine closes. You then have a joint venture with Western Mining Corporation. You've got a major mine workers strike, all in the period of low gold prices. You have the entry of DRD, the Durban Rhodoport Deep, who now owned Emperor Gold Mines. And this, combined with a military coup in 2006, resulted in Emperor Mines shutting again in 2007. And then we have a period of revival, which I'll talk about in a minute. So I'll just carry on and talk about this little period of instability. So EGM shut, as I mentioned, 91-82. The gold is the gold production, and this is the gold grades. Now, if you remember from my table previously, you had gold grades in the 10, 20 grams. So you can see the decline in gold grade over time as we go down. So in 1985, Western Mining Corporation joint ventures with Emperor Gold Mines, and they operate for about 7 years. They introduced new metallurgical technology to see if they can improve the recovery of gold. And then from 1993, as I mentioned, Durban Rhodoport Deep owns Emperor Gold Mines. They bought the gold mines out and operates it. And I must admit, the timing was very bad for these guys, because they went in and purchased the mine at a period of very historically low gold price. And then in 2000, 2007, they shut, military coup in 2006. And then we have a period then of revival in 2008. So this is the period where Durban Rhodoport Deeps mined it. Sorry, go back. This is their annual report in 2073. That was the 7th anniversary of gold in Fiji. And here they're showing they've got a decline. They're mining now by decline. I think if you go to Fiji now, you'll see that same monument that the Prime Minister unveiled for 70 years production. The next slide just shows, this was a presentation completed by DRD in 2006. On the right-hand side, they show the declining gold grade, gold production, down significantly from previous years. And they attest this to undercapitalisation, in other words, poor infrastructure, ageing infrastructure, the price of energy going up, the labour costs going up because the veins are narrow, it's high labour intensive, weak mining strategy and a poor leadership. So that's what EG. So all in all, together combined with a low gold price, they put up the white flag and sold, shut the mine. So in 2007, when the mine was shut, Emperor sold it to Westtech, and then Westtech sold it to Red Lion, who didn't do anything. And then in 2008, River Diamonds, which was a AIM-listed company in London, purchased the Emperor Gold Mine off Red Lion. And then they changed the name from Emperor Gold Mines in 2008 to Vatukoula Gold Mines, VGM. And give credit where credit due, VGM started exploring to look for new ore. And they were successful in 2007 by the discovery of another new vein here, new system, which was a catalyst then for a revival. And you start to see the gold grade starting to pick up and production starting to pick up with the discovery of this new vein. But they all recognised that the infrastructure was ageing and it needed a massive investment. So to that effect, VGM bought a Chinese company called Zhongrun in 2013, and they purchased 66% stake in Vatukoula for $40 million. And that money was instrumental in building up the infrastructure, the mining fleet, refurbishing the shaft. In 2015, Zhongrun then bought out Emperor Gold Mines completely. And so this is the first time that there was no real Australian input onto the mine at all. So it was a real change of scenery. But to them, they invested in a new plant, and in 2019 they spent another $5 million investing in the rehabilitation of the shaft. So the Chinese did invest a significant amount of money in rehabilitating the mine, to the point where in 2021, last year, the gold production and silver production was up significantly from previous years. And late last year, in 2021, Sandstorm in the United States invested another $30 million in another upgrade as part of a Gulfstream royalty. So, and that's the plant complex as it was last year from the Fijian sun after this extra investment. So, and the Chinese are now own it 100%, and it's no longer a public company; it's a private company. So access may be a little bit more difficult, but nonetheless, it's still in operation. It's still going after 90 years. So just on the last slide now, you know, why was Emperor important? Well, both the Fijian stock market rise and the subsequent crash, combined with the discoveries in Papua New Guinea and Bololo, were really instrumental in supporting the economy, the Australian economy, after the aftermath of the Depression. Both Fiji and, as you saw in those statistics, were producing over 3 million pounds of gold per annum in a very critical period in Australia's history when financial stocks were dropping. Others really is agriculture. And this really was the catalyst for resource stocks to increase right up until 1969, when they were 69% of all the companies listed on the market were actually resources. So very important time in Australia's history was the discovery of the Fijian Emperor Gold Mine. Okay, so that's it. Any questions?
That's very good talk, Lee. It's Ken McQueen here. I was lucky enough to visit Vatukoula in 1983 with a group of students, and we looked at the underground mine and the open pit, and even then the underground workings were pretty scary. But we also visited Namosi, which back then was just a prospect. We walked up the creek with Peter Rodder, who you might know. But what's happening there? Is that actually mining now, or are they still doing
No, still in feasibility study. It had passed through several hands. I was there with AMHA, and we just had the first drill holes in there in 1980, and I had a look at some of the core then. But it's passed into, well, Newcrest has got it now. I believe they were looking, it was low grade, and I believe they'd discovered a new high grade zone or part of it, which they were doing more drilling on to see if they could lift the overall grade to make the economics better. That's the last I heard of it.
Yeah, they're also trying ore sorting to upgrade the ore as well.
Okay. Okay.
Can everyone turn on their microphones and videos if you haven't? We'll get the conversation going.
You've got a question?
I must say, Lee, that those gold grades just absolutely spectacular. I was really surprised at how high they were. It's just amazing, really.
Yeah, and I guess what amazed me too is the you don't need free gold to have high gold grades. You saw those Telluride ore specimens. They don't look particularly just look grey stuff, grey metallic stuff, but they are exceedingly high grade.
Quite extraordinary.
Yeah. Those specimens, by the way, came from Professor Lawrence's original collection. I managed to, because I was a student of his, and I managed to get hold of them. So I have his original collection there. Yeah.
But the photo of the pure gold specimen, that was absolutely beautiful.
Yeah. I thank John Chapman for that. He's our resident photographer at the New South Wales Mineralogical Society. So, yeah, it's a historic specimen. You don't see too many Fijian gold specimens around.
Yeah, just talking about gold specimens and that, both the Australian Museum and the W.C. Clark Core Library have spectacular specimens from the 1930s and 40s. One character you reference is Dr. Loftus Hills. He appears quite often within the Fiji mines. He also a very notable character within the Tasmanian and Australian mining scenes back in the 30s, 20s, and 10s. So he's a very interesting character.
I couldn't find a photo of him.
Neither could I.
So he was blank, unfortunately.
He hid from the newspapers because of the activities he did.
Yes.
Yeah. The other interesting point, you mentioned Bilalu in Papua New Guinea. That goes back in the 30s, and that's probably one of the first fly-in, fly-out sites in the world. All the equipment, that's hundreds of tons, was flown into that site.
Does anyone know what happened to AMHA, and are they still active, or have they just pulled out of Fiji?
Who's this?
The company that you were with.
Oh, AMHA.
Yeah. Are they
AMHA was AMHA was a worldwide company based in the United States. It was a huge thing. It became Cyprus AMHA. They were into oil, and they own Mount Newman. They own Forestania Gold, and so on and so on and so on. No, they eventually put all their eggs in the molybdenum basket, and they didn't realise that there was a lot of byproduct moly from the copper mines of South America. So so they AMHA broke up, unfortunately. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that.
I have a memory that one of the ball mills we looked at in one of our conferences had actually come down from Fiji. Does anybody know anything about that?
No.
No, sorry.
Where?
New South Wales, I think, somewhere.
Yeah, one of the things I found, there are quite a few members who aren't attending who have you know, some contact or some relationship with the Emperor gold mine. Mine is my wife. When she was a little thing back in the 60s, she actually lived there for 2 years. My father-in-law actually worked in the powerhouse there. So how things are small, you know. I said Emperor gold mine, and he said, yeah, I was there. So there are connections within our membership.
Well, I thought it was pretty amazing there too that Frank Packer was involved, and they must have made a lot of money out of the share. That's all I see.
And Wren, for goodness sake.
Who's been notorious
Yes.
and featured in fiction as well.
Just go onto Trove and look at the skullduggery in the 1935-36 from Western Australia to Fiji. There are lots and lots of articles.
Is roasting still used at the mine?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Yeah, most of the bulk of the ore they're mining now is pyrite, arsenic pyrite. So the gold's quite fine grain and locked in the sulfides, so they got to break it open. So yeah.
Hello.
Sorry, Lee, you said they were going to extract the tellurium, which I think previously just went up the chimney. But do you know what they're using it for? Is it used for a semiconductor purpose?
Yes, it must, of that order, yeah. Yeah, the Chinese will be doing something. Yeah, I'm not aware. Yeah.
Lee.
Yes.
Ian Johnson's my name. I haven't spoken before. I'm retired, but I was chief geologist at Emperor through the 60s.
Okay. Oh, well. Right.
I've enjoyed the presentation.
Oh, excellent. Well, you'd know some of the workings in the new vein systems, I guess.
Well, whatever was happening in the 60s, I left in 1970, just before independence.
Okay.
But a couple of corrections. During your talk, Lee, you talked about the William Wallace shaft, which I thought was a Freudian slip, mate. It's the Wallace Smith shaft. William Wallace was another guy altogether.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Rob Roy.
Around the other way.
No, but during the 60s, the mine was unprofitable because the grade was 12 pennyweights and we mined 300,000 ounces a year. But it was the second biggest industry in Fiji through the 60s. There was no tourism at all.
Yeah.
And the sugarcane with CSR was the big industry. And we employed 2,000 people in that mine in the 1960s. And we made no money. And the government, to keep it going, gave us a grant of £200,000 or £300,000 each year to keep us going, employing those people and producing gold. It wasn't until the gold price moved in 71, 72 that the mine became profitable. And as soon as that happened, a group of New Zealand investors took Emperor over. And to pay for their cost of acquisition to give an early return, they were non-mining people. They mined all the high grade. And that made it profitable for about 2 years and then went bust. Mm. We had a discovery in 67 in the Dolphin area of a chamber of high grade ore that you wouldn't believe. It would have been the size of 4 or 5 big lounge rooms, and it was solid telluride, and the grade was thousands of ounces to the ton. And we put a locked door on that, and each month we had a target of gold production, and we could take risks getting up there. In the last few days of each month, you'd go down to the bank, open the locked door, get a few bags of high grade and tip them in the mill. It had a value way beyond its contained gold, because without that, we couldn't have kept going.
I believe they did that at Porgera as well in Zone 7. There was a similar area like that as well.
The interesting about the wire gold, which you showed that lovely specimen.
Yep.
When you put that under a microscope, it's all gold's all cubic.
Yes.
And those wires are just stacks of little cubes, one on top of the other.
You see that quite often. I was working in Woodlark, and in PNG, we got the same style mineralisation, the same crystals of gold as well. Yeah. It seems to be must be a temperature thing.
Yes, I don't know, Lee, I'm sorry.
And I believe Porgera had the similar
Yes,
wire gold as well.
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks.
I noticed from a description of the mine in '64 there was no roasting, and then roasting was shown for a period around 1980. Was there much change in the mineralogy during that period, or was roasting used to improve the recovery?
I don't know of any change, but roasting did help the recovery. Western Mining came in and were disappointed with the end result, but while they were there, they made a number of significant improvements.
Right. Okay.
They brought a lot of technical skill to the mine, which wasn't there before.
Yeah.
Any more questions?
Yeah, just this is a question for Ian or for Lee. Is there any memory as to where the head frames came from over the shafts that you have?
Ian speaking, I have no memory of that at all. I do know that the chimney from the roaster came from Kalgoorlie, brick by brick, and was erected on site. And we had a cyclone in 65 or 66, I can't remember, and it blew the chimney down to the ground. And a makeshift one was built of 20 or so 44-gallon drums stacked on top of each other, which used to cover the whole bloody mine site in sulphurous fumes for most of the day.
So are there any photos seem to be hard to come by of the mine itself over the course of history. Is there any archives or anything that you know of that have photos of the mine back in the day, in 30s, 40s, 50s?
I did have quite a few photographs, but we lived in Darwin in the 70s, and during the Cyclone Tracy, I lost a lot.
I got a book from Art Dryson. He sent me. Yeah, that's got a lot of photos in, and some of the photos that I got from the 50s through to the 70s came out of that book. Previous to that, most of the sources was just from newspaper articles in the that Pacific Monthly magazine. And it's just a matter of trolling through all of those and figuring, yeah. And they're the ones I just took the best ones out that I could see.
Yeah, beautiful. Thanks, Lee. Thanks, Ian.
I missed the start of the talk, I'm sorry, but John Wren was mentioned as the original shareholder, and Packer.
Yeah, with Bill Borthwick.
And Theodore, a stockbroker from Melbourne.
Yeah, well, I'll put up the prezzo. Ed wants the prezzo, so I'll put it up. So I had all the original, there's some photographs there of Bill Borthwick leaving the site on horseback and stuff like that. So, so they were good photos.
And John Wren's son visited the mine in my time. He was still active.
Yep.
Yeah, the New Zealand archives have quite a collection of photos of the Emperor Gold Mine. Same with the White Airlines Limited and the Australian Institute of Mining and Metallurgy have quite a number of articles scattered throughout their proceedings. So there's quite a lot of information there. The family photos I've got have been hit by fungi, so they're all over them. They've been really scattered.
What was Loftus Hills of Emperor Gold Mine's days connected to the Loftus Hills of Western Mining Corporation? Anybody know?
Sorry, I didn't quite get that.
Loftus Hills in Tasmania was getting on a bit in the 1920s or so.
Yeah, I just wondered whether there's any connection between Loftus Hills of Emperor Mines days, Loftus Hills of Western Mining Corporation in more recent years, or before they.
They are different people.
Yeah, a different bloke, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely different blokes, but whether the same family or what, no idea.
No idea. But Loftus Hills goes from 1890 till about 1940.
I guess I am.
It's an interesting character to look up to. If that's it, I'd like to make an announcement that we've got the Borough Conference on in September. If you want more details about that, go to our website. So it's 3 days at Borough and touring around the copper belt of South Australia. Our next meeting will be on Sunday, the 16th of October. It will be a members session, basically formulating that now. Be a 5-minute talk by member on any topic of their choice. So I hope to get about 10 people talking. The other part of that will be, we'll be starting